Got plenty to talk about with my next guest live in studio, Don Tracy. He is the chairman of the Illinois GOP. Don, thanks for taking time with us here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Absolutely. And we were just talking about how you've been on the job now for, 2.5 years or so?
I have, since February of 2 years ago.
So, and that's is kind of exceeding the standard
The
kind of
average
time
tenure is a year and a half for a state chairman. In fact, we have 16 new state chairmen just from the beginning of the year.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Throughout the country. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So what's the current status of the Illinois Republican Party? I mean, we've got, of course, the primaries coming up. We'll talk a little bit about that, but kind of reflecting back on the 2022 election, how we looking?
Well, we're working on a lot of different things. And one of our biggest initiatives right now is Bank Your Vote. I want Republicans to vote early so that we can use our GOTV, get out the vote resources, on the low propensity voters. And because it's so much more efficient that way. Because if a Republican votes early, say the 40th day before the election when early voting starts,
right,
then we can mark them off the list and we don't have to chase that ballot. Otherwise, we have to chase ballots sometimes right up to election day, and that costs money. It's postcards, text calling, door knocking, and all that. And it's better to use those resources on, people, Republicans and conservatives that don't vote that often.
And what about the idea, and I know that ballot harvesting is, it's got a negative connotation, of course, because anytime you have mail-in ballots, it can open it up to the potential for fraud. I think that's kind of just common sense, has been known for decades. But, of course, we expanded mail-in voting. But in Illinois, you can collect ballots and turn them in. There's an interesting loophole there that I don't think people have really thought about when it comes to the drop boxes, because if you do collect ballots, and you take them physically to the clerk's office, you have to have a signature of the person you're collecting it for and your signature, and they have to see that. But I don't think that that's possible when they just have the ballot drop boxes. So that's a different story altogether. But when it comes to ballot harvesting, what's the party's...
Well, it works the same way with the drop boxes, the official drop boxes, of course. But Illinois has very liberal voting rules. They're not good rules for election security, for a safe and secure election, but those are the rules that we have to play by now. And Illinois does allow ballot harvesting and ballot chasing. So, if the Democrats are doing it, we have to do it. We have to take full advantage of that situation, and so we are. But it's a twofold approach. You got to protect the vote, which we call election integrity, or election security. And because people are going to vote early, and if they're going to vote by mail, and we want Republicans to take advantage of those easy voting opportunities, then you got to convince people that your vote is going to be safe. So, we call election integrity defense, and we call ballot chasing. We call that offense. And in the past, we've been focusing on election integrity, and we're in a better place now. We have our first time ever. We have an election integrity director for the Illinois Republican Party. Hired him about 6 months ago. That's going well. Now we're working on hiring a Bank Your Vote director statewide, so that we can go on the offense and get more Republicans to vote early, and then give us the resources to get other conservatives and Republicans to vote.
Talking with Don Tracy, the chairman for the Illinois GOP. Of course, those are some of the logistics of the politics here, but let's get into the policies if we can. Let's first, we got Invest in Kids. That's set to expire at the end of the year. A lot of headlines about that, not just with the families up in Chicago rallying to extend the program. I imagine they're going to be at the State House in droves. But kind of fascinating to see some hypocrisy in this overall conversation.
Absolutely. It's just unbelievable hypocrisy. You have the president of one of the largest unions in the country, the Chicago Teachers Union, who has been fighting the Invest in Kids Act, which is a scholarship program for about 9,500 mostly Black and Hispanic kids, mostly in the Cook County area. It's a great program. Doesn't involve public funds because it's a tax credit program. I fully participate in that program, and you get a 75% tax credit, and then the rest you're just giving. So it's a way of encouraging more money into education for low-income kids that otherwise wouldn't have school choice. It's a school choice program. So you have the president of the union advocating against school choice for these children, fighting it to the death, allowing it to expire at the end of this year. And yet she puts her own child into a private school because she exercises school choice because she has a very large salary as the president of a union. And it's not just her, but it's also one of her top lieutenants, Sean Denny, does the same thing, advocates against this low-income scholarship program for kids, and then puts his child into a private school. And I think that the Senate President, Don Harmon, and the Speaker of the House, Chris Welch, have done the same. I think Governor Pritzker has likely done the same. So Democrats, they weigh against school choice because the teacher unions don't like competition, and then they do the opposite. Teacher union should be first about the children, second about the teachers, last about politics. But they've reversed that now. It's first politics, second the teachers, and the children come in last, and it's dead last. And that has got to change. And that's why we have failing public schools, particularly in Chicago.
Talking with Don Tracy, chairman of the Republican Party here in Illinois, another policy issue that seems to be an issue that Democrats are wanting to wedge into the national conversation for the 2024 election. They're saying it's book bans. And they had Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias testify in front of the U.S. Senate this week. Some pretty jarring testimony, especially with Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, reading out of two books, very graphic, explicit stuff we can't play on broadcast radio. But obviously, it looks like Democrats are trying to make this one of the cornerstones of their policy agenda heading into 2024. But really, what is the state law that Giannoulias was highlighting in the U.S. Senate? What does it do to public libraries and school libraries?
It's just amazing to me. I mean, today's Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party most people grew up with. It has taken a hard turn left. I mean, who thought that, Democrat Party would be against reliable and affordable energy? And whoever thought that, Democrat Party, would be against law and order and against prosecuting for shoplifting? And whoever thought the Democrat Party would be out defending child, pornography in schools and in school libraries? And that's what's going on with these books. I think one's called Queer Gender, another one's called Let's Talk About It, and another one is called Not All Boys Are Blue. And, some people say, well, how do you define pornography? And, the old joke is, well, can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Well, when you hear when you hear Senator John Kennedy grilling Alexi Giannoulias, and getting him to even admit it's pornography. He didn't use those words. Giannoulias didn't use those words. He just said it's disturbing. But if it's disturbing, why was he there in D.C. defending pornography in school libraries and in schools in general? It's just unbelievable.
Obviously, this is going to be something I think we're going to hear a lot more about heading into the 2024 election, not just with Illinois' law, but Democrats criticizing the Florida governor's education policies and so on. But still some more policy issues.
Greg, before we move
Sure.
on from that, if anybody has any doubt about this being pornography, just go to YouTube and look up that examination of Senator Kennedy of Giannoulias, and you will know this is true pornography that we want to keep out of school libraries, and the Democrats apparently want that in school libraries in the name of free speech. Well, it's made. That's the other thing about Democrat Party. That used to be for free speech, but not anymore unless it's pornography, I guess.
And in Illinois, the law is that if schools or local library districts restrict certain materials, they could have their tax dollars withheld from the Secretary of State's office, and a lot of people pushing back against that, saying that that takes away local control because you've got local people elected to school boards and also library districts.
That's right. If a school board decides they don't want these pornographic books in their library, then Giannoulias is threatening to take money away from them, and that is just flat out wrong.
Don Tracy, stay tuned. We got a couple of more policy issues I want to tackle, including corruption and the no-cash bail system that's getting ready to start up in Illinois on Monday. So a few minutes left with Don Tracy, but we got to get through this commercial break first with Springfield's Morning News on WMAY. Back with Don Tracy, live in studio, chairman of the Republican Party. Don, we've got about 4 minutes left here, continuing talking about policy. You've got corruption still top of mind. Tim Mapes convicted of lying to investigators. You got the ComEd 4, and then Mike Madigan. He's facing trial next year. Anything substantive being done to curb corruption in Illinois politics?
Yes, I work on that every day by trying to elect more Republicans, because if you'll notice, it's the Democrats that are being indicted, convicted, and pleading guilty. It's not Republicans. I've been chairman about 2.5 years, as we alluded to earlier, and in that time frame, I think almost a dozen prominent Democrats in Illinois have been indicted, convicted, or pled guilty, and not just minor league players, but names like Mike Madigan is under indictment right now. His trial is set for April. His chief of staff was just convicted. Some of his top allies in the Illinois General Assembly were convicted. Senator Terry Link was convicted. Louis Arroyo, a representative for gaming bribery. Martin Sandoval, another prominent senator. It's just unbelievable. And these are all Democrats.
And obviously, we haven't seen much by way of substantive ethics reforms at the State House. So we'll be watching to see if anything like that comes up during veto session. But another big issue, Don, is the beginning of the end of monetary bond in Illinois. That comes Monday. Right. This was a big issue heading into the November 2022 election. Democrats say they won on the issue. I would imagine Republicans say, well, the maps were drawn in Democrats' favor. But regardless, your thoughts on what's going to happen come Monday?
Yeah, well, they won on the issue because they remapped the judicial districts so that they have successfully converted the Supreme Court of Illinois to a 5-2 Democrat majority. There was a chance before the judicial remapping that it might have ended up being Republican 4, Democrats 3. Had that happened, I don't think this unconstitutional act would have been held constitutional by the Illinois Supreme Court. Democrats will say, then the advocates for, I guess, criminal rights versus victim rights will say that this bill isn't going to let hardened criminals on the street, whereas we Republicans think it will. And the Democrats will say that's because, there are safeguards in the bill that allows you to keep the really bad people in jail. What they don't tell you is that it does make it harder to do that, to keep them in jail, and more expensive. I think Bob Berlin is the state's attorney for DuPage County, and his estimate is that it's going to cost an additional $65 million for prosecuting, the bad criminals. And it's just a few of the really bad criminals that can change law and order, that can eliminate law and order, because it's just harder under these new rules to keep the hardened career criminals in jail. And you need more prosecutors, you need more probation officers, you're going to need more law enforcement all the way around, and you're making the policeman's job, the law enforcement job, so much harder.
And that's
basically it's a big unfunded mandate.
Yeah, and that's something the taxpayers are going to bear the cost of.
Absolutely,
in the
local
future.
Taxpayers, because it's an unfunded mandate. The state's not covering this additional $65 million for DuPage, and I know Jack Campbell's coming on next. Maybe he knows what it's going to cost in Sangamon County.
Sure.
I have not heard that number, but if it's $65 million for DuPage, it's got to be in the millions for Sangamon County.
Don Tracy, GOP chairman in Illinois. We'll have to talk again in the near future. All right.
Thank you, Greg.
It is Springfield's Morning News, 7 o'clock.
From the Fly SPI studio.